Hey everyone, welcome back to Switchcraft, and it's a great day to be a gamer. With Pokemon set to make the jump from being a handheld game to having the option to be played on a console later this year with Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, I decided that I wanted to make a video ranking my top 5 mainline handheld Pokemon games of all time. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. Up first, we have the first game of Generation 5, and a game that did a lot of things very differently for the first time with Pokemon Black and White for the Nintendo DS. Released on March 6, 2011 in North America, they take place in the Unova region. Unlike previous versions, Pokemon introduced prior to Generation 5 cannot be obtained in this game before completing the main story and defeating Team Plasma. Pokemon Black and White also had us learn of the story of the mysterious N, and in my opinion, gave us one of the deepest and most interesting storylines of any of the mainline games. Pokemon Black and White left out features found in previous generations, like Pokemon Following You and the Battle Frontier, but gave us pretty substantial graphical enhancements over the previous versions. There were some really sweet camera angles, and on an interesting side note is that this version was the first to use speech bubbles as opposed to a dialogue box at the beginning of the screen. And it's also the first time that Pokemon names didn't appear in all capital letters. There's some trivia for you. Black and White, more so than in any version to date, gave us more to do after defeating Pokemon League, and the ability to participate in what are called rotation battles. While this could be frustrating at times and relying on a certain amount of luck, these rotation battles were just frequent enough to keep the battle system interesting. For everything that it did differently, Pokemon Black and White made it to number 5 on my list. Up next at number 4, we have a Pokemon game for the 3DS. Generation 6, Professor Sycamore, and Pokemon X and Y. If Black and White were a departure from the mainline features we came to expect from a Pokemon game, Pokemon X and Y saw them back with a vengeance, and done better than ever before. Pokemon X and Y featured a 3D battle style and cel-shaded characters instead of sprites. We had the option to turn on the stereoscopic 3D of the 3DS in battles, cutscenes, and in other certain areas. Animations in this generation were overhauled as well, with more realistic attacks and attack reactions. We had an 8-way directional movement grid, allowing players to walk diagonally, bicycle, roller skate, as well as the ability to ride Pokemon in certain cases. We saw horde encounters where up to 5 wild Pokemon could attack you at once in the wild, and the dreaded sky battles, from where you could get drawn into a battle across the screen while standing on, let's say, opposing cliffs. There's nothing worse than being drawn into one of these battles when you don't expect it, and your Pokemon are running dangerously low on health. A feature that I really liked about this game was with the Battle Maison and the actually useful Experience All. Both of these made leveling up your Pokemon much easier and took away some of the grueling grind that came from if you wanted to find a new Pokemon or wild Pokemon that you wanted to add to your party. Pokemon X and Y were also the first time we saw Mega Evolutions, and were so cool. It was a shame that you didn't really get to experiment much with them until very late in the game. Overall, X and Y were a joy to play and easily made number 4 on my list. At number 3, we have a game with possibly the most nostalgic value of any game I've ever played. I'm talking about Pokemon Red and Blue for the Game Boy, and the way that I played them on the Game Boy Color. This was really the first game that started it all for me and millions of others in North America. This was the first time that the USA and Canada experienced what it was like to catch and battle pocket monsters. And there was no looking back. From the depth of gameplay for 1998 to what Junichi Masuda was able to do with the music on his Commodore Amiga where he composed everything, we have one of the select few 10 out of 10 masterpiece ratings on IGN.com, and a game that I'm sure everyone watching this has played. If you're in your 30s, Pokemon Red and Blue were a very important part of growing up. From learning the value of hard work, sniffing out all 150 original Pokemon, to how important persistence is when grinding and leveling up your Abra and Magikarp, when the only moves that they knew were Teleport and Splash, to true satisfaction and accomplishment when they finally evolved into Kadabra and Gyarados. It taught us how to make friends, especially with that one kid in class who had a link cable and a different starter. It was probably Charmander. And there was a very good chance that this game could be number one on a lot of your lists. But if you make it to the end of this video, you'll see why it's my number 3. At number 2, perhaps already adding to the fuel, to the controversy, the firestorm I lit putting Red and Blue at number 3, we have their sequels, Pokemon Gold and Silver. Gold and Silver took everything that Red and Blue did and made it bigger, and made it better. We had a bigger map and a ton of new Pokemon, even if you did just get used to the original 150. We saw what Game Freak was able to do with a game made for the Game Boy Color, and it brought the new region this game is set in to life. We have new HMs, we have new ways to traverse the world. The fact that Gold and Silver are ahead of Red and Blue proves that I am capable of minimizing my nostalgia bias, at least somewhat, because Gold and Silver are, I believe, better games. Battle animations were ramped up, we saw the introduction of the little experience points required slider right underneath your Pokemon's health bar, which made leveling up much more convenient. We also saw the introduction of Pokemon eggs and the Pokemon breeding system. I gotta admit, I never took full advantage of this system, and don't ask me to explain to you how it works, even to this day. Another cool feature was that paradigm shift when these games were released in 2000 and Pokemon now had the ability to hold items like berries. To this point, adjusting for nostalgia, Gold and Silver were neck and neck with Red and Blue. But what allows Gold and Silver to squeak out ahead into the number 2 spot is that once you conquer Pokemon League and become a league champion, you unlock the very Kanto region from Red and Blue. You get to face all 8 gym leaders and see how the region has changed in the years since you got your first Pokedex from Professor Oak. In 2000, I wasn't as internet savvy as I am now, and so this was a total surprise for me. No spoilers. It was like having 2 games in one, and for that reason, it's my second favorite Pokemon game of all time. But before we get to number 1, I'd like to give an honorable mention to the mainline Pokemon game coming to the Switch in 2019, as it's sure to make this list. But we can't really talk about it now for obvious reasons. Mostly it's because we don't know anything about it. Okay, number 1. Remember how earlier in the video I said that I could make decisions without nostalgia bias? Well, I was wrong, because number 1 on this list is Pokemon Leaf Green and Fire Red. These games are essentially remade versions of Pokemon Red and Blue, while taking advantage of the increased graphical power of the Game Boy Advance. You had beautiful graphics and animation, remixed music, detailed sprites, and a full palette of colors. It was pretty much everything you could hope for in a remake. It allowed you to relive the best moments of your childhood, except this time, it was backlit. Leaf Green and Fire Red remain true to form and follow Red and Blue almost exactly, except that once you beat the Elite Four this time and have at least 60 Pokemon in your Pokedex, Professor Oak asks you to go back to the Sevi Islands to find Pokemon he's never seen before. This sends you on a fantastic journey and hints at unlocking yet another region, but first you must find the Ruby and Sapphire in the Sevi Islands, unlocking trades with Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. You can challenge a stronger and tougher Elite Four again, and legendary Pokemon will now begin roaming Kanto. We basically got everything we loved about Pokemon Red and Blue updated, with a decade of enhancements, and then packed into the first half of these games, accounting for just how much bigger and better this game was, how many Pokemon you could catch, how interactive this game was with other versions, and with how good of a job they did modernizing an absolute classic. It was enough to make it to my favorite Pokemon game of all time. Let me know what you think of my list below in the comments, and if you would have a slightly different order. It's a great day to be a gamer. Switchcraft out.